Movie quotes seem to fall into three different categories. The first and most familiar category is the line everybody knows. I know Kung Fu, come with me if you want to live. Even lines like, I could have been a contender, lines you know even if you don't know which movie it came from. The second bucket is full of lines you only quote in very specific company, amongst friends or family with whom you have a shared experience. Lines like "You lose" from Red Dawn, or "Step off Grandpa" from New Jack City, or "Chow down with a family unit" from Raising Arizona. Most of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, which is why I only quote those lines around an extremely specific set of people. Now, years ago, I discovered a third category, the line we all remember forever but never quote because we don't think anybody else remembers it. One day I was in the office, sitting near some friends. We were clicking mouses and clacking keyboards, but apart from that, it was dead quiet. No one had spoken in probably 10 minutes. And then, completely out of nowhere, in reference to no earlier conversation relevant to absolutely nothing, someone said, "That's not entirely accurate." And everybody busted out laughing. It's a line from one of the most watched movies of all time, but it's spoken by a minor character whose name we don't even learn until the end. Not for any mysterious reason, but simply because no other character bothers to call him by name. Few of us could even name the actor who plays him. Regardless, we know him well, and we hate him. And the filmmakers, the ones who created him, hate him. And his own actor very clearly hates him. He might be the most irritating character cinema has ever given us. But in order for us to feel hate this unconditional, love must come first. A decent number of us weren't even alive when Independence Day hit theaters in 1996, so very briefly, one day, out of nowhere, a bunch of terrifying 15-mile-wide alien superships enter our atmosphere. They're so imposing that the filmmakers can repeat the reveal several times over and completely get away with it. By the time we see him through the eyes of Will Smith, whose character is the last to roll out of bed, we've already seen him 5 times, and they just keep getting scarier each time. Director Roland Emmerich and writer Dean Devlin were sick and tired of alien invasions that were discreet and quiet and relied upon mysterious infections or shapeshifters sneaking around. They wanted to give us an invasion that hit us right in the mouth, and the end product is every bit as fun as that sounds and more. Independence Day is an absolute riot. It's nowhere close to my favorite film of all time, but it is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's not a sequel, nor was it adapted from any existing IP. It's a completely original story written specifically for this production. Among such films produced by American studios, it still places 10th all-time in total box office receipts, and that's in 1996 dollars. Independence Day was more successful at generating pre-release hype than any other movie I can remember. But of course, since they created all their characters from scratch, there was no T-800 Terminator or Iron Man to hook us. There was tons of star power in the cast, but the first teaser, which aired 5 months prior during Super Bowl 30, featured exactly none of that star power. All we saw were shadows and explosions and nameless doomed extras running for their lives, and then the shot that sold the movie. It's in this shot that we can observe that love I was talking about. Today, 99 times out of 100, this White House would be built and exploded completely with CGI. But this was a real 14-foot wide plaster model built with such painstaking and loving detail that the production supervisor said it kind of broke his heart to have to blow it up. And even when they do, it's so playfully on the nose. In keeping with the 4th of July theme, the first beam from the energy cannon is more of a firecracker fuse than anything. The surge of energy crackles down the fuse, and when it hits, we're treated to one of the most tremendous single shots we have ever seen, fully soaked in by a state-of-the-art camera that captures it at 300 frames per second. In his documentary Hypernormalization, Adam Curtis attributes this scene and other landmark-destroying scenes like it to a 1990s America gripped by a fear of the near future. And while I do think he's onto something, I see something smaller. In all these flying little shards of plaster that took enormous time and expertise to put together, I see a piece of art made and destroyed with pure love and affection. Now, if I had called this summer blockbuster an artful demonstration of love in 1996, I would have been laughed out of whatever room I was standing in, but not only does it look more beautiful than a lot of stuff you're likely to see 30 years later, it's a far more convincing expression of enthusiasm and joy for what is being made. This movie bounces with creative energy within the special effects, the story, the pacing, the dialogue, and especially the characters. This movie offers us 20 characters which A, speak dialogue in multiple scenes, and B, are given names, so regrettably the dad from the Wonder Years who plays some nondescript army guy barely misses the cut. The dialogue of these remaining 20 are plotted here along what I have determined to be 110 separate scenes. I had to make a few judgment calls as some scenes are anchored to things like TV broadcasts and fly from place to place, but ultimately I settled on 110. Independence Day is a somewhat atypical summer blockbuster in that there isn't really any one main protagonist or plotline. The surviving characters do eventually rally at Area 51 in the third act to battle the alien menace, but they arrive from 4 separate locales: Los Angeles, the California desert, Washington D.C., and New York City. Way out in LA, we find the loneliest character, First Lady Marilyn Whitmore. She doesn't even meet any of the other LA characters until she's pretty much done for and seems to exist only to make the president sad when she dies. In the primary LA track, we find Jasmine, played by Vivica A. Fox, her son Dylan, and her dipshit friend Tiffany, who she unsuccessfully tries to convince not to attend an alien-welcoming rooftop rave party. Tiffany barely makes the cut thanks to her 3 last words in a second and final scene. One might argue it's a little too pretty. Now that is comic relief if I've ever seen it, so let's start a counter for such characters. We immediately see comic relief character number 2 in Jasmine's love interest, Captain Stephen Hiller, played by the Fresh Prince himself. Will Smith is stoic in a few scenes, but the unforgettable scene 60, which is made up entirely of him talking shit to the alien he shot down as he drags him across the desert, more than offsets any of his more serious moments. He speaks 72 words of dialogue in this scene, which, by the way, is what this Z-axis is all about. The higher the bar, the more words that character speaks in that particular scene. Will Smith will ultimately speak the third most lines of any character. When he's called back to base, he joins up with fellow wisecracking hotshot Harry Connick Jr., who seals his comic relief credentials when, about 12 hours after presumably almost everyone he has ever known has died, he bursts into song.
Well, I got it right here, yeah!
Over here in the desert plotline, we have Randy Quaid, playing a crop duster pilot whose perpetual drunkenness is played up for comedic effect. He's the proud father of, thanks to massive edits for runtime, 3 of the most completely undeveloped characters you are ever likely to see in a movie. The New York City plotline is nothing but comic relief. It's anchored by Jeff Goldblum, who previously endeared himself to us as the jittery and unserious Dr. Ian Malcolm.
Must go faster.
And is here to play more or less the exact same guy.
Must go faster. Must go faster. Must go faster.
They decided they needed to balance that comic relief with some more comic relief in the form of the great Harvey Fierstein, who later wrote in his memoir that it felt like they were shooting a comedy. Hell, maybe they were. I mean, we're already at 6 comic relief characters. Make that 7 with the funniest, and I would argue greatest character, Jeff Goldblum's dad, played by Judd Hirsch. Writer Dean Devlin has said that the character of Julius Levinson was inspired by his uncle, from whom I would bet money he stole most of this line verbatim.
If I knew I was going to meet the president, I would have worn a tie. I mean, look at me. I look like a schlemiel.
This line is the reason a 13-year-old oversized Massimo shirt-wearing Gentile in Woodstock, Georgia spent half the summer of 1996 saying he looked like a schlemiel. That may have been cultural appropriation, and for that, I am sorry. This character's total obliviousness throughout most of this movie is inspiring. In scene 41, we find our hero scurrying to evacuate the White House prior to its destruction. He gets on board the chopper and sits down next to his son, whose laptop indicates that human civilization is down to its last 9 minutes or so. Hirsch's character knows this. He spent the last few hours hearing all about it.
We have our own phone. Yeah.
And all he cares about is that he gets his own phone. It's as though nothing terrified Emmerich and Devlin more than the idea that anyone watching their movie would ever take it seriously for a single second. They even threw in an 8th comic relief character in the weirdo shut-in mad scientist played by Brent Spiner, best known to audiences as Commander Data from Star Trek. In this role, he ended up endearing himself to audiences so strongly that when they wrote this movie's sequel 20 years later, they actually retconned his death in this movie so they could bring him back in that one. The DC plotline, by contrast, supplies sorely needed straight man characters. Margaret Collin as Connie the White House press secretary and the iconic Robert Loggia as General William Gray. Bill Pullman stars as both the president and a fighter jet pilot, which is a pretty fun combo to have. Pullman comes in highly credentialed as a sci-fi leading man, having previously starred in Spaceballs, which remains the best and most intellectually engaging Star Wars movie. Even with these counterbalancing DC figures though, nearly half the characters in this movie are either often or always funny, which calls into question whether comic relief is even the term here. Maybe I've got it backwards. Maybe we've got so many goofs on our hands that they felt the specter of a human extinction event was necessary to cut through all the humor. Now, filmmaking is a business. The object of producing a blockbuster is to make a boatload of money. But I am convinced of the cast and crew's genuine affection for this production, for all these characters, and for everyone who bought a ticket. It comes through. If you're willing to make all this room for personal affection, though, why stop there? Why not save a little extra room for pure, concentrated spite? A couple years prior to making Independence Day, Emmerich and Devlin had worked together on the 1994 surprise hit Stargate. There, they worked with an MGM executive named Joe Nimziki. A Wall Street Journal story quotes a spokesman for Emmerich and Devlin diplomatically saying that they had a complicated relationship with Nimziki and encountered creative differences. This appears to be the only actual original reporting on the matter. An Entertainment Weekly story claims that working with Nimziki was an unpleasant experience for Emmerich and Devlin. There are a few other poorly sourced crumbs found across the internet claiming they hated Nimziki, although I haven't been able to track down any instance of either of them actually going on the record about it. If this is a fight, I have no dog in it. I don't know any of these people. For all I know, Nimziki was being perfectly reasonable and they were being difficult. Ultimately, that doesn't interest me. This is what interests me. It's not unusual for filmmakers to name characters after friends, people they worked with, a lawyer they see on a billboard, whoever. Is it as innocent as that? Did they patch things up with Nimziki and name a character after him as a goodwill gesture? Or do they still have some feelings toward Nimziki that they need to work through? In getting to know the fictional Albert Nimziki, I think we will find our answer. The fictional Nimziki is played by James Rebhorn, who passed away in 2014. I still miss him. He played supporting characters, never a lead, so you often had no idea where he was going to show up, but you were always happy to see him. By all accounts, he was not only a tremendous actor, but a terrific human being. So it's with all the fondness in the world that I say that on film, he was an asshole. Rebhorn typically played roles that weren't necessarily authority figures, but were sycophantic and in service to authority. He played a few different parts on Law & Order. He was the prosecutor in the series finale of Seinfeld. He was the joyless tightwad dad in Blank Check. Of greatest interest to me at the time was that he appeared in The Adventures of Pete and Pete as McFlimp, the malicious siding salesman who ran Artie, the show's beloved superhero, out of town and off the show forever. Though he didn't exclusively play this type, he was the best in the world at it. Not evil, exactly, just a self-interested, stuff-shirted, weaselly, conniving, condescending suit who always found a way to put you, the viewer, fully on tilt. I think he did it by being aggravating without going overboard, by tapping into a type of asshole we could all find familiar. So, their decision to cast Rebhorn as Albert Nimziki in the first place is clue number 1. Mr. Nimziki, who serves in the President's cabinet as the Secretary of Defense, speaks his first lines in Scene 11. He's in the Oval Office with President Whitmore and General Gray as they mull over what little knowledge they have at this early stage that there is a gigantic object of some kind that is nearing Earth and that it's slowing down, suggesting that it's some kind of intelligent presence. They could sit tight and observe what it does next, they could try to somehow communicate with it, or they could just launch a bunch of nukes at it and see what happens.
What if it doesn't pass us by? Let's retarget some ICBMs to blow it out of the sky.
He is immediately shot down.
And risk turning one dangerous falling object into many.
A moment later, he jumps the gun and tries to declare DEFCON 3, despite not being the president.
Absolutely. General, contact NORAD. You tell them we've upgraded to DEFCON 3.
He is immediately shot down.
It's not what the president said.
So far, the most ominous and concerning quality of this unknown object is that it is slowing down, and yet, upon learning that it's come to a stop completely, he somehow interprets this as a good thing.
Well, that's good news.
He is immediately shot down.
Not really, sir.
And then there's a small piece of expositional dialogue. I'm not going to pull the tape on every single one of his lines since some are unremarkable, but I will be sure to include cue cards of every single line throughout this study, just so you can see I'm not cherry picking. The vast majority of his lines are aggravating in some way. Shortly thereafter, in scene 14, when President Whitmore decides to stay in the White House so as not to spread panic, Nimziki tries to lecture him out of it.
We have to maintain a working government.
He is immediately shot down.
I want you to get the Vice President, the whole cabinet, and the Joint Chiefs and take them to a secured location. I'm staying.
This is how things are going to go for our buddy Al. He jumps the gun without ever knowing what he's talking about, and all of his ideas are bad. Despite this, he's allowed a pretty substantial amount of dialogue, this while there is intensely high demand for real estate within this script. You've got not only a government full of worried people trying to figure out what to make of this thing, but entire families of characters in New York, the desert, and LA who are just waiting to be developed. Several characters will remain undeveloped, in fact, because there just wasn't enough time in the movie, but Emmerich and Devlin are making sure that this doofus gets all the time he needs. From here, Nimziki does cool his jets for a few as the aliens begin to deploy their massive city destroyers all over the world. Will Smith is deployed to El Toro, Jasmine goes to work and warns her friend Tiffany not to go to that stupid party. Randy Quaid is thrown in jail for starting a ruckus after people still, for some reason, don't believe his alien abduction story. Jeff Goldblum, having detected a signal that suggests an alien attack is imminent, has sped down to the White House, and the president now leaves the briefing room to receive this critical information.
You're leaving now?
He can do that. He's the president. Shut up. Between this and the Oval Office scene, you'll notice that just about every time he interacts with President Whitmore, it's to scold him in that trademark nasally little snivel. As we'll later learn, there is a reason for that. We do, in the briefest of moments, see another side of Nimziki in scene number 48. The alien energy cannons are firing up all over the world, and everyone in the DC plotline is now scrambling to board Air Force One before they're caught in the blast. Wait. Who was that? Who handed Connie her briefcase? Who was this selfless hero, this magnanimous good Samaritan? It was none other than Albert Nimziki, who picks up the briefcase she accidentally dropped, says, "Here," and hands it to her. Is it a special briefcase containing the nuclear codes or something? No, it's just some regular briefcase. Regardless, remember this image. This is the one and only time in this entire film that you will see Albert Nimziki do anything to help anybody. It is the only positive contribution he will ever make. Connie finding her briefcase is the good news. The bad news is that the alien aggressors have laid waste to New York, DC, and LA, killing countless millions of people. Additionally, a counterattack effort by a detachment of F-18s was a total failure. As it turns out, all our weapons are completely neutralized by their hyper-advanced shield technology. All the while, as our man Al explains here, our communication channels are breaking down worldwide. For the characters in the DC plotline who are still on Air Force One, the only idea left is to fly to NORAD. Albert has a second idea though. Guess what it is? Nukes.
I spoke to the Joint Chiefs when they arrived at NORAD. They agree we must launch a counteroffensive with a full nuclear strike.
He is immediately shot down.
Over American soil. You're saying at this point we should sacrifice more innocent American civilians. Is that right?
That is no way to talk to somebody who recently handed somebody a briefcase. How quickly we forget our heroes, how quickly we erase a good deed, but the salad days are over for Al Nimziki, whose reliably awful ideas continue to be swatted down like flies. For those keeping score at home, he is now 0 for 5 in the ideas category. Remember that he first introduced himself to us in this movie by breathlessly advocating that they volley a bunch of nuclear ICBMs at this gigantic space object just because it was there. The man loves nukes. What are the things you love the most? Your family, your relationship, mountain biking, Thai cuisine, death metal, birdwatching, the Jacksonville Jaguars, however much you love them, is how deeply Albert Nimziki longs for nuclear Armageddon. A moment later, it's learned that NORAD, their destination, has been wiped out. The aliens are clearly capable of destroying anything, anywhere with total impunity, and humanity has yet to come up with literally any sort of plan in response. What we need here is an idea. Everybody's counting on you, Albert. You are the Secretary of Defense. You are the guy who's supposed to know what to do. Come on, Al. Think.
Mr. President.
Oh, wait, I know. Nukes.
We must launch.
This is already the third time he has advocated for nuclear weapons. He is immediately shot down.
You're going to kill them and us at the same time. If we fire nukes, then everybody else who's got it is going to fire them. You know what that means? Fallout. You ever hear of nuclear winter?
You're 0 for 6, Albert, and this time you've been defeated more comprehensively than ever before. The aliens understood where the city centers were. They knew enough about us to weaponize our satellites against us and choose places like the White House and NORAD as the specific points of impact. They know everything about us. Their shields render them invincible to every weapon we've tried. Why would they not be fully prepared for our nuclear weapons? But even if nukes did work, Jeff Goldblum is right. It would bring about nuclear winter, which is game over. Regardless, Albert has had just about enough of this interloping common civilian.
Shut up, Captain! Get him out of here!
He is immediately shot down
Hey, don't tell him to shut up!
by another common civilian whose outburst silences the room. This random guy wandering around Air Force One, who by his own admission looks like a schlemiel, commands more respect than Al ever has. 0 for 7, buddy. I think we've seen just about all we need to see, haven't we? Nimziki harbors so many of the same qualities you would expect to see in a studio executive you resented. He's whiny and condescending, he ridicules the ideas of all the much more cool, interesting people around him. All the while, he possesses one and only one idea of his own. A complete dud of a pet project that he nonetheless advocates for relentlessly. He's a total suit. I mean, let's do a tie check. If you really want to know who the square in the room is, take note of who does and does not loosen their tie in the throes of a mass extinction event. President Whitmore's got a loose tie. Even the generals let it go. Not Albert. He's wearing his Sunday best to Armageddon. In just about every way, big and small, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin are telegraphing their intent here, but the one thing they haven't yet done is identify the character Albert Nimziki by name. There is one scene in which the president calls him Al, but that's it. No character has actually spoken the word Nimziki out loud, and the name hasn't even been displayed peripherally as a desk nameplate or lower third or anything like that. They will list his name in the end credits, but maybe that's where they call off the dogs. Maybe they won't subject Joe Nimziki to the indignity of going to the movie theater on a date and hearing Bill Pullman say, "Mr. Nimziki, you are a loser, and I hate you." Maybe the character of Al Nimziki is Emmerich and Devlin's personal little punching bag, a private little in-joke that isn't meant to be understood by the viewing public. They're just allowing themselves some fun, and there's a lot more fun to be had. They have only begun to bury Albert Nimziki. Let's pick up right where we left off in scene 64. Jeff Goldblum's dad still has the floor, and he's going on a little bit of a rant. He derides the president and cabinet for being completely unprepared for an alien attack, claiming that they recovered an alien spaceship decades ago and kept it in Area 51. Everyone sort of rolls their eyes, and the president explains that no, all that Area 51 stuff is an invention of the tabloids. There was never any recovered alien spaceship. And then Albert Nimziki says, excuse me, Mr. President, that's not entirely accurate. There's a whole lot to dive into here. First off, that line was crafted in the most infuriating possible way. The assertion was a very simple one, that the government had recovered an alien spaceship. That statement cannot be reasonably reduced to a fraction, so how could it only be partially true? And second, I think this is the right time to educate ourselves on some lore. Believe it or not, there are 6 Independence Day novels that are authorized as canonical. One would expect there to be novelizations of the film as well as the sequel, Independence Day Resurgence, which came out 20 years later. But there's also a prequel novel, as well as 3 supplemental novels, none of which seem to share any of the foundational silliness and goofs and spoofs that define the character of this original movie. To be fair though, if I'd known about any of these books when I was 13, I probably would have loved them. And they do offer a few interesting details about our hero. According to the novelization, Nimziki's persistent snottiness toward the president is explained by his secret desire to use this ordeal to accumulate political power and make President Whitmore look weak. Somehow, he served as Secretary of Defense for 3 separate presidential administrations before this one, suggesting he's been in this post for perhaps as long as 20 years or so. He's nicknamed the Iron Sphincter, and the word Machiavellian is used. Meanwhile, in Silent Zone, the prequel, it's revealed that prior to his career as Secretary of Defense, Nimziki was the head of the CIA, and as early as 1972, he knew all about Area 51 and its recovered alien spaceship. Jumping back to the film's novelization, we're told that Al Nimziki harbors ambitions of running for president himself and wants to keep Area 51 his own secret little thing. Weirdly enough, Albert Nimziki did eventually run for president, as mentioned in Independence Day Crucible, but got waxed by General Gray. In short, the books hate Nimziki as much as the movie does, painting him as a cold, calculating backstabber who's willing to withhold potentially civilization-saving intel so that he can be president one day. Which wouldn't make sense, because if he doesn't save civilization, there would be no America to be president of. Nor would it make any sense at all that Nimziki, the SecDef and former head of the CIA, would just forget about Area 51 until some random guy wandering around Air Force One just happened to bring it up. Nimziki's reveal of Area 51 is the most crucial hinge point of the entire film, and yet Emmerich and Devlin just cannot get it to make sense. It only makes sense once we bust through the fourth wall and determine that this fictional inconsistency can only be explained via a non-fictional plot to drag the name Nimziki through the mud back and forth as many times as they can, believability be damned. Earlier I described Nimziki handing the briefcase to Connie as his only meaningful contribution. In finally divulging the existence of Area 51, he does put things in motion to have Air Force One rerouted there, which will ultimately end up saving humanity, but I refuse to place this in the win column for Al. And finally, we have to talk about this line's delivery. I just read it flat with no inflection. That's not entirely accurate. But James Rebhorn's slow roll delivery here was the kind of work that made him a king among character actors, one of the best to ever do it.
That's not entirely accurate.
An hour into the movie, you finally experience the promise of good news coming from the most unbearable asshole you've ever met. 99% of people watching this scene had no idea who James Rebhorn was. We didn't know his character's last name, we almost certainly didn't even catch his character's first name. But we never forgot this line, and we never forgot him. We've made it to scene 67, and most of our characters have now made it to Area 51. The DC delegation is here, as is Will Smith, who's hitched a ride with Randy Quaid and his completely inconsequential children. Vivica A. Fox, her son, and the about-to-die First Lady are on the way. Everyone say hi to Adam Baldwin, a sorely needed straight man who is so much of a stiff that he never actually gets a first name, just a rank. Commander Data offers some not at all necessary but still appreciated comic relief. Our man Albert here is in relief of something. He's kind of a stress ball for his fellow characters, for us the viewers, and certainly for Emmerich and Devlin, who have decided to fill the "how can this man be so stupid" plot hole with Al Nimziki's bones. In scene 71, when General Gray asks him why the hell he never bothered to tell anybody about Area 51, he offers this dead fish of an explanation.
When were you planning on informing the rest of us?
Had been deemed classified.
By who? Who spent the last 2 or 3 decades as Secretary of Defense and head of the CIA? You, man! You! You deemed it classified, you stupid fuck. Anyway, he is immediately shot down.
You should have told us about this when they first arrived. You should have warned us before we launched a counterattack that cost us the lives of hundreds of American pilots.
You're 0 for 8, Al, and on top of it, it is now acknowledged that you have the blood of Harry Connick Jr. on your hands. Albert Nimziki is what TV Tropes calls a hate sink, a type of character crafted for the express purpose of acting as a receptacle for our grievances. This movie really needs one of those since the aliens are so unknowable. They only actually communicate with our characters one time, and only then to say, "No peace, die." Their motive is simply to exterminate all life on Earth and extract its resources. They're really more of a natural disaster than an actual enemy, so it's left to poor Al to serve as the sorry stand-in for an actual villain. The guy needs a win in the worst way, and in scene 75, he finally gets it. After linking telepathically with one of the aliens, President Whitmore learns that their plan really is to wipe us out and ruin our planet. And if that's what's gonna happen anyway, damn it, why not do the deed ourselves?
Let's nuke the bastards.
Al, you've earned it. It's your big day, buddy. Come on, look at the camera. Give us a smile. Maybe that is your smile. Anyway, Folks, it is time to nuke Houston. Farewell to LaToya Luckett, Jeff Bagwell, Slim Thug, Rudy Tomjanovich, Craig Biggio, Megan Thee Stallion, Doug Drabeck, Doug Brocale, Beyonce, and Paul Wall. Al does not care about any of you. He's never been happier, and in fact, this might be the first time in his life he has ever been happy. After spending the entire movie quite literally begging for this, after all these years of pencil pushing and rat fucking, he finally gets to realize his dream of nuking a major American city. It's the only thing he's ever wanted, and in scene 78, you can really tell. The warhead detonates and the video feed goes white.
Oh, yeah, to hit!
Notice that the president, the general, and the major are still sitting there, racked with tension, because there's obviously no visual confirmation of the thing they care about, which is the destruction of the alien ship. Al is not waiting to celebrate because I don't think he cares. He blew up a nuke. That's all that matters to him. Even if you haven't seen this movie, I'm sure you know what's up here. Once the dust settles and the video feed clears up again, they find that the nuke did absolutely zero damage to the alien craft. What do you know? They were fully prepared for that too. President Whitmore makes the plainly obvious call to abort all the other planned nuclear strikes across the country, and now you get to enjoy some more peak James Rebhorn. In his response, he goes from dignified cabinet official to inconsolable child in 2 seconds flat.
Well, other bombers might have more luck, so we shouldn't just give up on this!
Gotta say, he sounds an awful lot like a studio exec greenlighting, Home Alone 3. Anyway, he is immediately shot down.
I said call them back.
Albert Nimziki will never get to drop a nuclear warhead on an American city again. You just don't recognize the best moments of your life until they're already gone. This whole goof about Nimziki wanting to preside over our extinction like the high priest of nuclear annihilation is, of course, a little bit of creative license on my part, an effort to offer some kind of explanation for it. It seems that Emmerich and Devlin were so preoccupied with throwing Nimziki in the trash can that they forgot to develop any kind of motive for any of the things he says or does. He's just the guy who says all the dumb stuff and wants to make the worst possible move at any given time. Why? I don't know. He's a dumbass. That's the only explanation we ever really get. Which is why I delved once again into lore. Now, this is gonna get a little strange, and in fact, I'm worried that merely talking about it will make it disappear. This is a scene from Independence Day Resurgence set 20 years after the events of the first Independence Day. Here, Judd Hirsch is reprising his role as Julius Levinson, who's promoting his memoir, How I Saved the World. Now this is a real, actual book that I actually bought in real life. I presumed it was some low-effort schlock they pushed out as some tiny forgettable part of their huge marketing campaign. In that scene, Levinson is reading to a scattering of disinterested people in an assisted living facility, suggesting there is no interest in his book. Similarly, in an instance of life imitating art, the actual book has 0 reviews on Amazon. Within, the fictional Julius Levinson explains that Nimziki was plotting an ascent to the presidency by hook or by crook. He believed a successful nuclear strike would establish him as a hero and get him elected, and when it completely failed, his plan was to filibuster every alternative until he could come up with some other way to be the hero. A very strange and scarcely believable motive, but still not as strange as having no motive at all. It wasn't until after double-checking this scene from the sequel that I realized I'd pretty much certainly been duped. The real-life book cover is a cheap imitation of the book cover from the movie. The photo is replaced by one of an obviously out-of-character Judd Hirsch at a press event. The publisher is a small-scale self-publishing outlet. Someone obviously just went off on their own and wrote and published this thing completely unauthorized under the name Julius Levinson. What's interesting, though, is that Nimziki's interest in the presidency wasn't first revealed until the novel Independence Day Crucible, which was published on May 24th, 2016. I think what we got here is a superfan who bought this book as soon as it dropped, devoured it so thoroughly that they remembered this granular detail, watched Resurgence when it dropped a month later on June 24th, saw the book in the movie, decided that it should be a real book and that they are the right person to write it, raced home, wrote the whole thing in a matter of weeks, and published it on Amazon because nobody told them they couldn't. Whoever you are, I just want you to know how impressed I am. If someone important sees this and gets your book kicked off Amazon, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we cannot admit this work is canon, so Albert Nimziki remains the flimsiest possible type of character, one without a motive. He will never become a real boy. Scene 82 is Al's magnum opus. It is when he elevates from one of the more irritating characters in the history of modern cinema to one of the very most irritating, if not number one, with a bullet. The man is entirely composed of a ceaseless moment-to-moment obsession with splitting the atom, and now that the nuclear strike didn't work, the option is off the table, and he is rendered an empty man. But to steal a quote, people who have been flattened by the Earth still live. This scene, set in the Area 51 alien spacecraft hangar, features just about every single major player in the movie. Will Smith, Vivica A. Fox, their kid, President Whitmore, Connie, General Gray, Jeff Goldblum, his dad, Major Adam Baldwin. Nearly the whole gang is finally in one place. This is when Goldblum proposes his ultimately successful plan to bring all the alien shields down.
We can't penetrate their defenses.
We know that already. What's your point?
Al, shut up. Let him explain. Now, here's a change of pace. He is not immediately shot down. Instead, Jeff, who hates Al, graciously sidesteps him nonetheless.
Right, my point is, if we can't beat their defenses, then we gotta get around them.
He's just not worth it anymore. Jeff goes on to demonstrate his newfound ability to disable the shield. General Gray, whose opinion actually matters here, is very intrigued by this. Jeff explains that they'll need to infect the mothership with a virus.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Just how exactly do we infect the mothership with this virus?
Al, could you stop? Could you just fucking stop? He is trying to explain it to you. Even if his idea turns out to be stupid, could you at least show some appreciation? He worked hard on this, he drew a whole diagram and everything. Give him a minute. Nimziki somehow shuts his yap for long enough for Jeff to get through the rest of it. It's an admittedly dicey plan that requires them to figure out how to fly this alien ship, dock with the mothership, and upload the virus that will disable the shields.
This is ridiculous.
Once again, Nimziki is even deprived the dignity of being shot down.
How long will the shields be down?
General Gray just ignores him entirely. Albert Nimziki has been boomhoured. Jeff has a little more bad news to share. Even if they do pull this off and upload the virus, the shields will only be deactivated for a few minutes.
You want us to coordinate a massive worldwide counterstrike with a window of only a few minutes?
Masterfully placed voice crack by Rebhorn there. He's the greatest, folks. Anyway, once again, he is not being shot down.
The shield's down, that might be possible.
Instead, he gets the kind of counter-argument that the big kids get. He gets a maybe. Surprisingly enough, his peers are being way more patient with him than they've been throughout this entire movie. I think they just pity him. Al, mistaking that for respect, is emboldened.
Oh, please. We don't have the manpower or the resources to launch that kind of a campaign. Not to mention that this whole cockamamie plan is dependent on a machine that no one in this world is qualified to operate.
Attention everyone, this guy is about to be run out of town on a rail. This is your last chance to shoot him down. Any character who has not yet had the chance to shoot him down, please step forward.
I wouldn't say that, sir.
He is immediately shot down. What the hell? How about one more for the road?
That thing is a wreck. Crash landed back in the 50s. We don't even know if it's capable of flying.
Never has Al teed one up this perfectly. Al, who, this entire time, and for decades prior, knew all about this alien craft, knew that there were aliens who knew about us, knew that their technology was light years beyond ours, knew about their anatomy. If you were one of a handful of people on Earth who knew about an alien spacecraft, you would think about it every minute of every day for the rest of your life. And either he kept it to himself for political purposes, or he just fucking forgot. This is the man who's telling you you're not good enough. This is the man who says your ship cannot fly.
Remove the clamps.
He is immediately shot down. This concludes our examination of Scene 82, the most verbose scene any one character has in this movie, with Jeff Goldblum contributing 238 words. It's also Nimziki's heaviest scene, with 110 words. This scene did need an antagonist, a naysayer, a wet blanket to establish how daunting this mission will be, but it's still remarkable that in a room full of stars and superstars, the filmmakers found this much time for Al. As we saw, Albert's fellow characters have started to ease up on him. So in scene 83, he's gonna have to ratchet things up in order to maintain his profound unlikability. Oh, I know. Let's go up to the president and tell him he's stupid because his wife is dead.
I understand you are upset over the death of your wife, but that's no excuse for making another fatal mistake.
For these next few seconds, Bill Pullman is going to step out of the role of President Thomas Whitmore and into the role of President Roland Emmerich.
No, the only mistake I ever made was to appoint a sniveling little weasel like you Secretary of Defense.
I don't think you understand.
However, there's one mistake I am thankful to say that I don't have to live with.
Mr. President,
Mr. Nimziki, you're fired.
There it is. They named him. Finally, at the very end, we learn for the very first time what this guy's last name is. Previously, even if you'd scoured every single line of dialogue, all you would know is that he is the Secretary of Defense and someone calls him Al one time. So, there you have it. Al Nimziki. What a specific and unique name. Wonder where it came from. If there was any remaining confusion over the nature of Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin's feelings toward Joe Nimziki, I think we have cleared all of that up. Again, who knows whether any of this is actually a fair portrayal of Joe. But in Albert, we find the silhouette of the worst kind of joyless managerial asshole we might expect a studio executive to be. These nuclear infatuations are his Geely or ballistic X versus Sever, and this plot to fly this alien craft, this thing that's never gonna work, is Emmerich and Devlin's Stargate. Their admittedly weird, far-fetched thing that will succeed if only it's given a chance and they know it. These authority figures are so rarely embarrassed or made to admit that they're wrong. It's a satisfaction you're just not likely to ever get. So Albert Nimziki offered them a chance to live out this fantasy, to give him an atomic wedgie and shove him in a locker before an audience of millions and millions, even if those millions couldn't quite understand who and what Nimziki was meant to be. In Nimziki, we see a familiar incompetence that we attribute to evil just because we fail to find any other source of motivation. But it's rarely evil. It's just ordinary incompetence on the part of a person with failings. We're all jigsaw puzzles with missing pieces, and they just happen to be missing the pieces that matter the most. Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum fly to the mothership and take down the shields. Randy Quaid yells "up yours" and flies his fighter jet directly up the alien ship's energy cannon, thus completing the most elegant butt-fuck metaphor you're ever likely to see in a summer blockbuster. The aliens are destroyed, the good guys win. But between here and there, we see one last little glimpse of Al Nimziki. In scene 105, people take shelter in Area 51 as the aliens mount a counteroffensive overhead. Kids are scared. Julius Levinson gathers some of these children around and leads them in prayer. And then he looks up and welcomes into the prayer circle the biggest child of them all.
Come on in. Shema Kolenu Hashem Eloheinu.
I'm not Jewish.
Nobody's perfect.
Of course he's not Jewish. He's not anything at all. He began this story as a man who knew where all the bodies were buried, a man with so much power that the title of Secretary of Defense didn't even begin to describe that power. And by the time this movie is done with him, he is, in a sense more literal than we ever could have predicted, sitting at the kids' table. Summer blockbusters are rife with hate-sink characters like Al who not only are killed off, but die in embarrassing fashion. Remember that lawyer in Jurassic Park who abandoned the kids, ran off to cower in an outhouse, and got eaten by a T-Rex? The template is there, and the payoff is satisfying as hell. In a less happy, less gracious movie, that would have been Al Nimziki's fate. For anyone unlucky enough to stand in the same room as Al, it was all downside, no upside. He was a lot of things. Inept, irritating, petty, so preoccupied with his stupid little secrets and intel classifications that he almost doomed humankind. Such a dimwit that in a movie in which a godlike alien race was brought down by a virus someone spent 10 minutes coding in Visual Basic, his stupidity was perhaps the least believable element. But in simply catching and releasing him, and letting him live on as the common man he always should have been, there's a rare degree of empathy that's at the very least interesting and perhaps even instructive. What do you do with all your resentment once it stops serving a purpose and ferments into useless bullshit? Can you do the thing you always needed him to do and just throw it out? Are you actually ready for the day you get what you want?